Welcome back from break. I hope everyone enjoyed their break and are ready to go again. We're going to change the format a little. The first half, Kevin and I did a lot of the talking, asking many of the questions, but this half we want for you all to ask questions. Now, before you're ready, I see you on the edge of your seats. Before you get ready to ask your question, I do need to introduce a new panel expert. We have with us Miss Susie Langley, and she is our adoption specialist, our adoption expert. So I'm just going to let her take a few minutes to tell you all about what she does and then get ready to ask all of the questions that you all have been asking Kevin and I for the past several weeks. Okay? All right. Susie?
My name is Susie Langley. I work for the Director of Foster Care and Adoption out of Nashville. So I am a central office employee, and we just work a lot with adoption issues and things that come up regarding adoption. We work on writing different adoption policy and protocols, and just basically trying to make sure that we have guidelines within the department to make sure that we get adoptions done very quickly.
Okay. All right. Now, let's get started with our questions. And we have no particular order, just ask whatever it is that you would like to know. Please come to the mic.
Hi, I've got a couple of questions for you, and neither one of them necessarily relate to the other one. The first one is, I heard you talking about taking a foster child to Florida with you on vacation. My family and I do have vacation plans this summer. So how does that relate? What do I need to do about taking a child out of the state, including them in on vacation plans?
You need to contact your worker and let them know when you will be going, where you're going to be, and they will write up out-of-state travel forms, and you just give them a few days notice, because sometimes it takes them just a few days to get that done, and then pack them and go.
Okay, good. Second question. Throughout Course 2-4 and all of them, we've talked about culturally responsiveness. My question is, what do I do if I get a child who is a different religion than I am? How am I going to address that? Am I going to church on Sunday, and they might want to go to church on Saturday?
Good question.
Great.
I can help you with that a little bit.
Okay.
I encourage foster parents to join the Foster Parent Association. There's a lot of different people, different religions that you could probably connect with in that association. Or if you know someone that the child already goes to church with, that the case manager can talk to about possibly letting them take the child to church during that time frame.
Okay. Would there be issues with me taking that child to my church?
If we cannot force a child to go to church.
Okay.
If the child wants to, you can. But as long as it's not a forced situation, or if the child, again, if the child doesn't want to go and we cannot force them. But if the child is willing, participant, and wants to go, we are saying take them. Again, find resources within your realm of foster parents, or ask the case manager to find someone to approve for you to take them.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good.
And while the next group member prepares to come forward to ask their question, I want to say to our guests that feel free, if you have a particular question that you want to ask, this is a time for you to learn more about what your friends and family have been doing. And I'm sure that our panel of experts will be glad to answer your questions as well.
Hi, I'm a single mother of one, and I am wanting to be a resource parent, and I possibly want to adopt a child too if it ever comes available. I've got two questions that go with that. One, what are some characteristics of really great resource parents when placing a child in a good adoptive placement, having that adoption succeed? What are some good characteristics?
I'm also an adoptive parent, and I think if you have a biological child, don't compare them to your foster child, and try and find strengths and constantly praise them for that, because that will negate the negative behavior that perhaps will go along with it, because it's very traumatizing. And it may not come right away. It could come back 4 months later, and you'll never know it. So if you're open to listening to them and just learning their individual quirks, their personalities, that's ideally the best thing. But treat them like your own. That's the biggest thing children will tell you. You know, I just want to be, you know, a child.
And I'm also an adoptive parent. I want to add to that, you know, don't be afraid to let your children talk about their birth family, because that's part of who they are. That's part of their identity. So don't feel threatened by that, because it's not going to take away your relationship with that child.
Thank you. You have another one?
Yeah, the second part of it is, what could I expect with the adoption process?
I guess that question would be me. The adoption process is pretty lengthy. We try to make it as we try to get it done as quickly as possible. But when you talk about the adoption process, you're really talking about at the time at which the team that works with the child determines that it's in that child's best interest to follow through with termination of parental rights, or the birth parent may make the decision that they can no longer parent that child, or they know that they would not ever be in a situation where they could have that child returned back to their house. So they may choose to voluntarily surrender their rights. At that time, the team would then determine what services we would need to put in place, what things do we need to get accomplished to ensure that this adoption happens very quickly. Some of those things are adoption assistance. Adoption assistance is monies that are paid to adoptive families when a child meets certain guidelines and criteria, and one of the biggest is special needs. And what adoption assistance is for is it helps defray some of the costs of parenting a special needs child. And adoption assistance will not pay for things that your private insurance or TennCare will pay for. It is to provide for services that you may already be getting, such as respite. It may provide for help you to pay for someone to help transport a child to multiple doctor's appointments that they may have to have, especially if you're a single parent and you're working. You can't always take off work, so you may actually have to utilize that to help have someone transport if your insurance doesn't cover it. We ask that during the adoption process that you put the child on your private insurance. I mean, just like any one of us who give birth at a hospital, when you're looking at adoption, we sort of raise the bar, so to speak, on your responsibility level, meaning when the child is in foster care, we will pay for daycare. However, once the adoption is finalized, we certainly expect that piece to be picked up by the family that adopts the child. The same with insurance. Just like you give birth, if you have a child that you give birth to, anyone expects you to put that child on insurance, and we would expect the same as well. Now, if there are circumstances that, for example, I have seen some children with severe medical issues. They're on insurance with the state, but for some reason, and they have certain doctors that they pay that have already a part of that insurance network, and for some reason, their private insurance may not have the same types of doctors. We have seen cases in which families choose to have them remain on the state insurance, and that's okay. Just as long as they understand that there are certain things that won't be paid for if, for example, the insurance does not pick that up.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we have another group member.
My wife and I are considering becoming resource parents, and I actually have a very broad or general question. But for each of you, what resources will be available to us in the position of resource parents?
I think those will vary depending on the needs of the client and you as a foster parent to meet the needs of the client, the child that's in your home. For example, the children that I deal with are a lot of as far as have delinquent charges that are in custody on the juvenile justice side. There might be some in-home services that we could try to help provide through our PSG program, which is how we pay for, sorry, I get those initials for everything around here. So, but that's how we pay for certain services to in-home. If there's an extra need that you can't, say, provide a person to come in to help you with maybe structure, or dealing with a child who may be a little bit more on the authority-defiant behaviors, and to help that client or the child to get themselves under control as well. That's one thing that I know we have helped, and it's not an everyday thing, but this is something that is a short-term help to get the foster or resource parents back on track to help the client on a long-term basis.
Also, as far as support for you and your wife, when you become approved resource parents, you have access to your foster parent advocate who is there for you as a support in any way that you need. If you would like support in court or in meetings, if you're having issues getting services for your children, or questions that you need to ask, your advocate's there to help you. The advocates also lead training on the Bill of Rights, which was mentioned earlier. That is your right as a resource parent, and so your advocate helps make sure that those rights are not violated. You also have the support of your local foster parent association. Most communities or counties have a local foster parent support, which is a great opportunity for you to network with other resource parents and get some support. We also have a state association, which is Tennessee Foster and Adoptive Care Association, that offers training and a yearly conference. So those are some supports for you as a resource parent specifically.
And we also have a resource parent support case manager that is assigned to your home. So if there are any issues or anything that comes up that you need assistance with, or maybe you're not getting the help that you need with the child, you have that person who advocates for you too.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Good questions.
And I'm actually a kinship parent. Will the services be any different? Do I have any less things offered to me or any different things offered to me?
No, they will offer you the same assistance with kinship as you get with any other foster child.
Will I get the board rate? Will it be more, perhaps?
No, it won't be more, but it'll be, you will get the board rate in most cases.
Okay.
And I don't think your board rate is not just because you're a kinship, it's more because of meeting the child's needs and the level of services that they will need, and not just about kinship.
But I want to say too, because I'm also a kinship parent, that it is different being a kinship parent than being a stranger foster parent, because you're dealing with your family and that child's parents and other members of your family who may not understand what's going on. So you're going to need a different kind of support from your case managers than the stranger resource parent does.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. Good question.
Another person. Come on up.
Hi. I guess my question is, as a resource, and this is to the resource parents that are on the panel, my husband and I, before we become resource parents, I guess we have the room, but what else do we need to have in our home to provide for the children that will be coming to our home?
I would just say, first and foremost, have a deep commitment to knowing that this is what you want to do and committed to follow through to whatever outcome of permanency is determined for the child, to have the supports identified for you so that you know who you can call on and who you can count on when you need help.
Okay. Also, when they're coming into your home, they're not interested in what you can give them. Okay. They need you at that time just to support them, and they may want to just sit and talk with you and just be there for them.
Okay. And I have one other question, if that's all right. And I guess this pertains to also back to juvenile justice. We're still interested in teenagers and the juvenile delinquent kids. And I guess I want to know, are there any parents with those juvenile justice children, are their parents' rights terminated also? And if they are, where do those kids go once the rights are terminated? Do they go to foster homes too? Or, I mean, can they, if that child comes out of that facility, can they come to a foster home? How does that work?
Well, there's several things that you'd just say. Yes, we do have children who have had their rights or parents have had their rights terminated, and our delinquent children do get adopted. They also use resource homes as step downs from our programs, so that they can get back into the community and see how their behaviors do, and if they're especially more work with the parents one-on-one, to give the parents also mentors. But we use, as far as resource parents, are a huge resource for us as well, because the clients that we have want homes and they want families and they need those families. So anytime, as far as for step downs, or if the client's family's rights or parents' rights are terminated, that we do look at the resource parents adopting them.
Okay. Thank you.
And we do have some additional training for foster parents, resource parents who take juvenile justice children. So that, in fact, it's really good for anybody that's taken teenagers.
Okay.
So it's a really good program if you're interested in that.
Yes, we are. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to say on the logistical parts too, as foster parents, it helps when CPS workers are bringing a child in the middle of the night. If you have just sometimes an extra change of clothes, diaper, if you know what age limit you want to take, have those things kind of in your home, because you're not going to get that board payment immediately. You're not going to get, and a lot of times if it's been a crisis situation, we're not even able to get stuff out of the home. So we may be bringing a child to you with their clothes on their back, and that is it. So just have some kind of different size range clothes, diapers, bottles, those kinds of things.
Good, thank you.
Hi, I guess this question is for the DCS FSWs. I'm here as a support to my parents, and I was wondering, would it be okay for me to provide babysitting for them if they want to go out to dinner one night, or if mom couldn't get to the school and pick up the child if the child was sick? Would that be okay?
That is okay. I guess when you become a resource parent, you are that child's parents, and you need to make the best decisions for that child like you would your own. And if they're comfortable leaving the child with you, that is fine.
If I could add, though, the attorney in me also wants to add that, but when the department makes an agreement with the resource parent to be that caregiver, if you need assistance, you have to get that new caregiver approved by the department. So should a resource parent want a niece or nephew to babysit, we would have to approve that person first, because just as you, we would do background checks, because we want our children always to be in safe hands. And we're not saying you would submit an unsafe person, but that's what we're charged with as the department, so we would have to approve everyone other than the resource parent to take care of the child.
In earlier PAF sessions, we discussed CPS, and I'd like to know what happens if a child charges an allegation against me as the resource parent.
I was wondering when you all were going to ask that. You asked it during the sessions. Let's hear the answer.
Advocate?
The resource, I mean, I'm not into that area, but I have worked foster care in several areas in the department, and we have to respond to that by looking into the allegation and making a referral to CPS for them to, first of all, investigate the situation to make sure the child is safe. There's as far as going into the home, and they will come out and talk to you, and they'll come out and talk to the child. And during that time, your home will be placed on hold while that investigation is going on. Again, we do this on all allegations on our homes, just to, first of all, to give you guys a safety as well as the department, because we want you guys to be in a safe situation as well. And that our children are first. We always investigate it. Second, we want to make sure that you guys are not in a situation that you don't need to be in.
And if you find that there's nothing, you know, there, is there some sort of record? Am I blackballed or something with the department? Does it mean that you will not place children with me as a result of having a false allegation made against me? What are my rights, I guess, is what I'd like to know.
I could speak to that. We have what we call a special investigations unit within the department who investigates foster care, resource parent abuse allegations. And yes, every time a report of abuse is made to the department, that creates a record. And the names of everyone involved, the perpetrator, and the victim will go in. But our special investigations unit, those records are all of our records are confidential. But those are even more confidential, and only certain persons within the department itself has access to those records. Only if you have access do you have permission to look, but we cannot discuss that outside of the department. So you would never have to worry if a church member called and said, I want to know if they've been investigated. We couldn't release that information. It's very, very confidential, and even within the department. So if it's unfounded, yes, it creates a record, but it would also show that it was unfounded and no abuse occurred. But it's not something that would be printed and passed around.
One more question. What is your policy on perhaps handling a child who's HIV? Do you inform the resource parents, or how is that handled?
Anytime you've got any sort of a medically fragile situation, whether it's HIV or something else going on, the resource parent absolutely needs to know, because they need to be taking the proper steps to care for the child.
Okay.
They need to be taking the proper precautions to care for themselves and any other children that may be in the home. So that's going to have to be something that they're going to have to know, because the child's going to have medical appointments to keep. They're going to have a medicine regime that they're going to have to maintain. They're going to have to know what their limits and their boundaries are. Anytime you're dealing with any serious medical issue, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that the state has certain foster homes that are trained to deal with these medical situations.
Okay.
It's been my experience in the past when I've had real medically fragile children, they were in special homes. They had additional resources available to that home. They might have a nurse that comes in and helps to care for the children, all sorts of things that are available. If you were willing to accept a situation like that, I think they probably have different training paths that you go down. Perhaps someone else can speak better to that. That can be a true calling. Those children need extra care, extra love. It can be heartbreaking, but it also can be a great blessing.
I think another important thing about your investigation is your advocate's role. And
Sure. Okay. Just to let everyone know that unfortunately, probably during your time as a resource parent, there's a great possibility that you will be the subject of an investigation. And so it's important for you to understand that your advocate, through the Bill of Rights, is provided to you to serve as a support for you and to be with you through that investigation, to support you and to answer any questions that you might have. Also, there are things that you can do as a resource parent to minimize the chances that you will be the subject of an investigation by following DCS policies and procedures, by having house rules that everyone follows and abides by making sure that you look to everybody else in a way that doesn't bring any kind of confusion, or it doesn't appear that things are not as they should be. And resource parents are offered training on other things that they can do to minimize the likelihood of that happening. And it can be a scary time, it can be very frustrating, but your advocate is there to be a support to you through that.
Okay, thank you.
While the next group member is coming, you said something about rules can you just give an example? Because is it a rule that the toilet seat has to be up? You know, what type of rules will help with the family?
Well, as far as specifically to allegations, since that's what you just asked, one of the basic house rules that a lot of resource parents have is that you do not come out of the restroom unclothed. That you go into the restroom clothed, and when you're taking a shower, you make sure that you come out fully clothed. That way there's no room for anyone to say that anything happened, or just by having a rule and sticking to it, a lot of times you can minimize the risk of things appearing a way that you wouldn't want them to.
Okay, thank you.
I have two questions. My first question is for the CASA representatives. How many children do you actually work with?
Our volunteers typically would work with just one child unless they're a part of a sibling group, and at which point that CASA volunteer would be involved with all of the children, simply so that there's a continuity there of both family members and issues regarding the children, because typically it's going to be helping the court if we can keep all of them together and knowing everything about them. And unfortunately, sometimes the sibling groups won't be together, but there's a benefit if you know all of the parties. So typically maybe one.
Great. My second question is, my husband and I, we actually live on a farm, and we have a variety of different animals, and I was just wondering if there was any policies or anything that we have to go by in order to have foster care in our home.
We don't, I can speak to that. I've had to review and look at a lot of policies, and as an attorney for the department, I'm responsible for knowing the policies. And there's not a specific policy that says children can't be placed on a farm, but always the foundation for what we do is that children be kept safe. And so if we would just, I know that your FSW would want to know what kind of activity you expect the child to participate in, if there's any kind of maybe dangerous tools or equipment, things like that. It would just be, you know, what would be safe, and maybe informing your foster care, your case manager, to make sure that the child's in a safe environment.
Animals can actually have a very therapeutic benefit for children as well. I have a couple of dogs that I keep in my office. And sometimes when I have children coming into my office, one of the things that I observe is how they interact with my dogs. Kids can talk to animals. They use them in classrooms as reading surrogates, whatever you want to call them. They'll have children who have difficulty reading aloud read to the animal. The way that the children interact, that is something that they can show love to. That's something that they may be able to express their frustrations about. Sometimes children who have been in really traumatic situations may act out and may be abusive towards the animals. That's a red flag, and that's something that you always want to make sure is explored in the appropriate setting. But watch how they interact. It's a good judge on what's going on.
Well, I know also on farms, you usually have dogs and cats. Those we do have to show that they have been immunized. So that's something I think your PATH trainers have already talked to you about.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. We have another group member that has a question. Wonderful.
Well, certainly encouraging to hear all the success stories, but this is kind of directed toward the resource parents. Are there some placements that just don't work out for whatever reason? Is there any idea of percentage, or how often does that happen? And if it does happen, what's the process? What happens if, say, I initiate or the child initiates a request that this placement isn't working? What can I expect to happen?
We've actually, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
We did have one that was moved, and I just contacted the worker, but it's not something that just all of a sudden normally just happens. You can voice your concerns to the worker on an ongoing basis, you know, and it's not, usually if that happens, it's not something that just cropped up all of a sudden overnight. There have been things leading up to this point. So the worker is somewhat aware that there have been some issues in that home. And if you request that a child be moved, the worker will proceed with that and contact the supervisor, and they will have a meeting, and they want to try to keep that child in your home if possible, because they have a lot of things that they have to go through if they move, and it's better for the child because they've had different placements to be consistent and leave them where they are. But if it's where it's just not possible any longer for that child to remain in your home, then you go with that worker, and then they'll proceed with the meetings to get that taken care of for you.
Okay. And is my standing as a resource parent then jeopardized because I requested a child be removed, or?
No, they keep sending them to us. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Debbie, did you want to add to that?
No, she answered everything, I believe.
Okay, all right.
Hi, my niece is considered ADHD, and they do not want her to be in a regular classroom. What options do I have? Can you help me with that?
Excellent question. Yes, one of the many things that I do is help you all as resource parents navigate the school system. And what I would say in that particular situation, we look at every child individually, but if it's interfering with learning, and she tends to have a lot of trouble maybe in in-school suspension or out-of-school suspension because of her disability, then we might need to make a referral for special ed.
Okay. I also want to revisit the CPS area. I heard someone say that your home would be placed on hold if a referral has been made. I have a friend that's also going through, and she has children in her home. I mean, what would happen to her biological children?
They would also be interviewed and investigated just to make sure that
One, they could be used as witnesses of the possible allegation, and there needs to be an assessment as to their safety and the risk.
So are they ever taken, are the biological children ever taken out of the home?
They can be, if the allegations are founded.
Okay, thank you.
I'm like a bad penny with my questions. I've got a question about when a child is returned home and then comes back into custody, what happens?
Well, we try to put that child back in the same resource home that they were in,
Excellent.
if possible. But, you know, you have to look at the circumstances and what children are now in that resource home. But to cut down on the trauma, that is our first option, is to try to look at that same resource home again.
So you do try and put them back in the same home. The second question is, Melissa and I have a son, Brian, who's a freshman in high school. He is involved with wrestling. And just to put it out there, we're basically interested in babies. That's what we want to have. How often do babies come around?
I think they come around, but there's more. We get a lot of babies in, but it's so many foster parents or resource parents who want babies that you may not get that call to receive a baby. It just depends on the who the foster parent support unit decides to place that child with, and what zip code they come from, and look at the family dynamics. So.
And a lot of our infants are drug exposed. That's how we get them. So
and what do you mean by drug exposed?
That the mom has taken drugs, cocaine, marijuana, whatever, during the pregnancy, has had usually no prenatal care or very little prenatal care. So you've got higher risk. The baby may be born healthy, but you've also got higher risks that you're really not going to know when you're stepping into that what could happen with the baby.
But another thing we look at, you know, when we place children, especially infants, you know, if we're going to terminate rights, is this a home that's going to be willing to be a pre-adoptive home? But having said that, we also need to make sure you're working as a team with us towards reunification, if that is our first goal and there's not hidden agendas there, that you're willing to adopt this child and not work with us in the birth family on the same goals. But we don't want kids to move. So in placing young children, especially young children, you know, we want that to be the place that they stay until it's time for them to be reunified or to move on to adoption. Hopefully that same family will be able to adopt. So there's a lot of things we really have to look at closely there.
Okay. Excellent. Good deal. Thank you.
I'd like to know how are we supposed to provide for these children? We already have children in our home. In other words, how much do we get paid for taking care of these kids?
Not enough.
Is there some kind of rates that we can expect, money that we could expect every month?
It's according to the age of the child. As they get older, the daily board rate increases. Okay. Or if they have a special needs, you may get a little bit more board rate.
But you're not going to make money on this. You're probably going to lose money, as I think all of these resource parents can attest. So, you know, be prepared that you're going to be spending money out of your pocket also.
Okay, thank you.
Build on that just a little bit. What is the board rate money for? You know, what is the daily rate right now?
It's different. It depends on the age of the child and whether or not the child has significant special needs.
So what is that money for the resource parents to use it for?
I'll let them speak.
School supplies.
Okay.
Clothes.
Basically taking,
swing set, food, anything they may need.
Allowance. And
Great.
I have 3 biological children, and we have spanked them in the past. So what's the department's policy, or how do you discipline your kids? First of all, what is your policy? And secondly, how do you discipline the kids?
I could speak to the policy.
Okay.
The department has a no spanking policy. It's clearly, we do not use physical force or don't approve of physical force used on our children for punishment. So there's no physical force whatsoever.
Okay. So how do you discipline your children?
Time out. A lot of time out. Talking, sit down with them and
whatever their issue is for the moment, try to sit down with them and talk it over with them, or work with them with that.
Yes.
And I think it depends on your child, too. We had two different personalities in our children. One wanted to be, punished by being sent to her room. So what we had to do with her is she had to spend time with me. And she couldn't be more than 3 feet from me at all times. And that really was more of trying to help her bond and understand what she was doing and explaining the behavior, because a lot of times they don't realize that that behavior is not acceptable. And if, depending on the age of the child, you can pretty much explain what the house rules are up front so that there are no surprises, and then, what the consequence would be.
You have to be more creative, I think, with these children than you are possibly even with your own. We had an issue arise with our daughter that at 7:30, that's her time to take a shower. But I went for some training, and she didn't go take her shower. When I got home at 9 o'clock, that hadn't been done. She goes, well, Dad kept us outside too long. So therefore, it was his fault that she didn't take her shower. So I said, we're going to get up in the morning and take your shower. So in the morning, we get up at 5 o'clock. Instead of 6 o'clock to take her shower. She's dressed, she's ready to go to school. Then after she's all dressed and ready to go to school, I said, it's time for you to take your shower. And she said, I already took my shower. I said, but yes, you have to learn that when I tell you it's your time to take your shower, you have to do what you're told to do. So we always take our shower at 7:30 because she knows that she may have to take 2 tomorrow morning.
Okay.
So.
Wow.
Okay, thank
Great.
you.
And there are also several training sessions that your resource parent support person can help you find if you are having difficulty finding other ways of disciplining, and also disciplining different types of children, sexually abused children, delinquent children. So there will be opportunities for you guys to learn other ways if you've not been able to find the right thing for the client or the child that you have in your home.
And again, using your advocate and your other resource parents that you've become familiar with through the association, and really talking to them about, have you parented a child with these types of behaviors, what was successful, what did you use that was helpful for you, and really just learning different parenting styles, sort of having tools, parenting tools in a little toolbox that you have that you can pull out and use whenever you need to.
Do you ever find that if you've developed a successful partnership with a birth parent, that tends to minimize some of the behavioral acting out of the children in the home? Great. Go ahead.
Every year my parents go to a leadership conference with their church. How exactly does respite care work? Who would they call to get someone to provide respite care for the children?
All right, resource parents?
Yes.
How does that work?
Respite is now left up to the resource parents to basically plan. Respite, of course, is offered to you as a means for a break or a rest, and the suggestions that I have been given are to use your support systems through your local association or other resource parents you know, or perhaps friends of the child or family members that, of course, DCS is comfortable with. You're free to leave them with approved people for a period of time.
While we have another question coming, I want to kind of jump back to the discipline issue that Ms. Bailey raised. When the answer was provided, it was provided in terms of resource parents. But what about for the child when they leave the home of the resource parent and go to school? Does the same policy apply for the school system?
Very good question. And that's a tricky one, and I wish we had the ed attorney here to speak to that. But what I can say to that is, in the state of Tennessee, corporal punishment does still exist. And I know we've had 2 cases that have gone up to our central office, to our Attorney General, and that's where we really need your input and you all communicating with us and the birth parents. But there have been 2 cases that we're fighting, and we're fighting school systems, but they're still out there. And that could be crucial. Again, we talked about how our children come to you. So the last thing they would need to do is be put in timeout boxes Some schools have timeout boxes or to be paddled. So it's really crucial, again, to know what's going on in school.
So you recommend that the parents share with the school system that these kids should not be physically disciplined, corporal punishment should not be used with them?
Absolutely. We do have a letter, if you get wind of this information. We do have a letter that our central office education division drafted in response to these two cases that I'm referring to. And we also have, I don't know if you all have heard of Ed Passports and school enrollment letters, but there's a brief line on that school enrollment letter that says, please contact your FSW, Ed specialist, and the TL or TC if these matters arise, and one of them are behavioral or discipline issues.
TL team leader, TC team coordinator.
And or myself. Yes, I'm listed on there too.
Okay, next question.
We're a resource parent. We want to be resource parents, of course, and have children in our home. And our daughter, she came with us, and especially for tonight, but she's been coming to the PATH classes too because she's going to be a big support for us. But her husband is incarcerated, and he will be getting out soon. Will she still be able to be a support to us if her husband is moved back into the home?
Depends on what he did.
That's right, it does. There you go. Yes, ma'am.
Meaning if it was a misdemeanor or misdemeanor,
Well, misdemeanor
or
felony, or if it was a crime against a person. You know, so we'd have to look at all of that and see if it's a safety issue for the child. And it might be that she could be a resource at your home without him being there, but you know, that would have to be looked at on an individual basis.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You all are coming up with some excellent questions. Thank you.
I have 3 different questions. I've been sitting over there pondering. My first question is, of course, I'm very, very anxious. And, you know, I've been really anxious this whole time and nervous and excited. When could I expect my very first call for a child to be placed with me?
As soon as you're approved.
That's right. How long did you resource parents wait?
It was 7 months, but that was a few years ago. I think they're much quicker to expedite home studies now.
Well, it's not just the home study. It also depends on the type of child that you're willing to take and the children that we have to come in at that point, because we want to do the best match that we can. And if you say you don't want children over 12 and all we have coming in is teenagers, you know, obviously you're not going to get a placement, you know, real quick. So it just depends on what you're willing to accept and the children that we have coming into the system.
My next question is I have a 3-bedroom home. And of course, it's me and my son. How many kids am I allowed to have? Are there policies? I mean, are y'all going to bombard me with as many as I'll take, as long as I'll take them? I mean, how does that work?
The rule is 3 children unless they're part of a sibling group. Sometimes they will do waivers to place more children in your home, but as a rule, 3. And each child needs to have their own bed.
But as you're going through the home study process, that's one of the assessments that we do as we're writing our home study, is determining your parenting level. Determining, you know, what needs you're able to parent, because the last thing we want to do is overwhelm you. We don't want you to be an unsuccessful resource parent, nor do we want to have to put our children in a situation where we have to move them again. So that's a part of the assessment piece of that home study process that we look at. And we'll sit down and we talk with you about all of that as we're writing the home study.
Okay. Now my last question is kind of back to the money stuff. I know with me and my ex-husband, we kind of trade off on income tax. I get my son on my income tax this year. He gets him on his income tax next year because, you know, there's joint custody and things like that. I mean, do we count these kids on our income tax? Can we not count them? How does that work?
And the panel turns their heads.
I don't think we have a financial person.
I think because you have physical custody of the child, but you do not have legal custody. So technically, I guess under the laws of the IRS is that whoever has legal custody is really legally responsible and can claim that child. So no, a resource parent cannot claim a foster child on their income tax.
And being a former foster parent, we asked our tax consultant that as well. And you don't claim that as an income, your board payments as an income.
So you don't claim the board payments? Okay. All right. Thank you.
And we have had such wonderful questions. Group, I thank you all so very much for your questions, but we are running out of time. What I would like to do is just ask Kevin if he has a last comment.
I do, and this is, we hadn't gotten into this issue yet, but I think it's really critical we get your feedback on this. If you remember, we had our youth panel session in session 3, and one of the youth that was there, the teenagers there, talked about this. What made me think about this was the culture discussion. One of the teenagers there talked about her experiences in foster care when she came out and expressed and shared that she was lesbian. What would you suggest in working with gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender teenagers? Because sometimes we don't know that that's their orientation when they come in, but then they might reveal that. How would you support that? Because her experience was very negative. So how would you deal with that cultural piece when you're dealing with teenagers?
As the guardian for a child, if my child came and said, this is my situation, one of the things that I would want to do is make sure that they have some sort of a positive support group, whether there is some sort of a support group for gay, lesbian, transgender children, whether it is that they are receiving individual counseling on when it is appropriate to come out to certain people, how to react to different reactions. You want to make certain that that child is made comfortable with who they are. It's not our job to change these children and make them into something different. We should not be inflicting our values on them. We should simply be open and accepting and say, okay, I understand. You have a different choice. Now let's talk about what that means to you. Let's talk about what that means to you in terms of society. How do we best put you in the position that you're comfortable with who and what you are?
Thank you. In closing, I would like to ask Sandy Holder, who is our regional administrator, to just share a final comment in regards to administrating the department. Basically, you know, you're working with all of the partners that we have here. A final comment, please.
Well, I think one of the main things is that teamwork concept. And I don't know if this is administrative or social work, because it's hard for me to, you know, because I'm basically a social worker too. But one thing that I think a lot of our foster parents don't understand is that the birth parents do not have to complete that permanency plan before a child goes home. As long as the child is safe, we can have in-home services with that family, have that permanency already started, and move forward. So don't, you know, put your values on those families and want them to be at the same level you are. And also remember, it's safety. Other little things can be done while the child is at home, and I think those are the most important things. And one other thing is make sure you keep your path information, because you go back and look at that, because we've given you a whole bunch of stuff to look at all at one time, and so you may want to refer back to that, you know, as you experience different things with the children or youth that may come into your home. And we appreciate all of you.
Thank you. Thank you. Group, please join me in just welcoming and thanking our panel for such wonderful information. Now, we will process this information next week. If you want to spend a little time with the group members afterwards, if they have the time, then please do so. Remember to do your in-review homework for this session, and remember to come back next week with a big smile on your face and prepare for graduation. And to our guests, thank you so very much for coming. And if you are interested in pursuing or becoming a resource parent for Tennessee, please see either Kevin or myself immediately following this session. Thank you and good night.